Hello and welcome to this presentation on the subject of infrared photography. Well, I doubt you need a diagram to remind you that all wavelengths of light come from our sun, but I confess that I was a little surprised myself to learn that visible light only covers such a small part of the light spectrum. The names of the other forms of light in this spectrum are going to be familiar to us, I think, like ultraviolet, X-ray, gamma, infrared, the subject in this presentation, and also microwaves. You will notice that infrared is quite close to the visible light spectrum. If you were to start thinking about taking infrared photographs, I suppose a question we could ask is, what is the typical characteristics of an infrared image? Well, the one I've just put on screen I think is fairly typical. Foliage contains moisture and that reflects lots of infrared light, so leaves can often appear almost white. Skies can be very powerful because clouds also contain moisture and reflect lots of infrared light too. Blue skies can go quite dark, even black at times, and together they can make skies look quite impressive. Of course, we do have options within our image editors to add delicate colour for a more surreal look to the infrared images we shoot. So as photographers, if we want to have a go at shooting infrared images, what are the options open to us? In my experience, there are three options. The first is via our image editors using our standard digital images. You may have noticed infrared filters in the black and white options of Photoshop, Lightroom and Photoshop Elements. However, they are a little bit of a fraud because they don't really create a good infrared characteristic at all. The second option is to use an infrared filter over our lens. Now the idea here is that a very deep red filter is used to block visible light falling onto the sensor, but it does allow infrared light through. However, in practice there is a problem with this method because our digital cameras also have an infrared blocking filter sitting over the sensor. So one filter is blocking visible light, that's our deep red filter, while the other on our sensor is blocking invisible light, and this results in long exposures even in bright sunny conditions. We also find that the red filter is so opaque that we can't see through it. We'll need to frame our shot first and then screw in the filter, so a tripod will be required for every shot. Here you can see the result of using the red blocking filter. Ignore the magenta cast for a moment, that really isn't an issue and we can come back to that a little bit later. But any movement in our image is a problem though. Now the cause of that softness is the slow shutter speed that we used. I remained with an f8 aperture because infrared light doesn't focus on the same plane as visible light. f8 helps us to ensure a sharp shot by just increasing the depth of field a little bit. But in this instance we could have used the aperture of f4, but we would still require a 2-second shutter speed and that would still also require a tripod. So this method, I found, soon starts to lose its appeal. The third option, and probably the most consistent, is that we can convert a camera to shoot exclusively infrared images. Now this is achieved by removing the infrared blocking filter over the sensor and replacing that with a visible light blocking filter, but of course there is a cost involved. You have to commit a camera that you might otherwise have been able to sell or trade in, and of course the conversion will cost too. You will find there are some different levels of conversion. When I chose the standard I wanted, I chose to block as much visible light as possible from falling on the sensor because I was looking for powerful black and white images. Now, this image is what you would get straight out of a converted camera. Again, ignore the magenta cast, it really isn't an issue, and we will explain later. This example is from a different camera. It's a camera where the visible light sensor that replaces the infrared one is not quite so strong as the one I've used. It allows infrared light in, but it also allows some visible light in too, and therefore a little more colour. Some enthusiasts use this colour to create surreal effects with their infrared images. However, there are other ways to add colour just using the tools of Photoshop, Lightroom or Elements. Here you can see one of the very first images that we shot with our converted camera. The magenta cast isn't hard to remove, as you can see from this example. And we can also see that the shutter and aperture are well within the range we need to be able to handhold the camera. How do we judge exposure for infrared photography? Remember, it's not an exact science, and we found it best to switch to a manual setting. Selecting f8 as a standard aperture and adjusting exposure after firing a shot, looking at the LCD to judge what we had captured. What we've found in practice is that in bright conditions we seem firmly within a range of a 60th of a second to 250th of a second at f8 in those bright sunny conditions. One option is to make use of the auto exposure bracketing, AEB. For example, if we set up our manual setting on our camera and then set the aperture to f8 and our shutter at 125th of a second, when we set up the automatic exposure bracketing, it will give us 3 shots, one at 125th of a second at f8, one at a 60th of a second at f8, and one at 250th of a second at f8 in bright conditions, and we found one of those exposures will be just about perfect. Here is another of the early images we shot with our newly converted camera. Very strong light, as you can see, directly falling on a white lighthouse, usually a recipe for disaster with visible light photography, but here we seem to be able to handle it pretty well. The strong magenta cast, of course, is caused by that new filter that's been placed over the sensor to block visible light. The inset picture is the same one we showed just a little bit earlier, but now we can see both of the images together. The inset was shot with a camera with a slightly different filter over the sensor, which allowed some colour to come through. Here again though, we can see that using 100 ISO we still had the ability to shoot with a 90th of a second at f8, well within the capabilities to handhold the camera, particularly this was a wide angle shot. Now we're exposing all of our images as raw files because we want to have the latitude to be able to take the picture you've just seen and convert it to something like this in either Lightroom, Photoshop Elements or Photoshop. Now one of the options we do have if we want to avoid that strong magenta cast when we import images into or onto our computer is to set up the custom white balance on the camera. Now we did this by simply photographing a plain area of green grass and then using that as the control to set the white balance. And there you can see the terrific difference in the image you can now see. Exactly the same camera, and if we move on to the next image and look at the ISO, aperture and shutter, we can see that's in the same ballpark as the previous one, but of course we don't have that very strong magenta cast. One of the other options that we have at our disposal is to be able to change the way we view the image on the LCD on the back of the camera. With my camera I can select to view black and white. And while I'm evaluating the infrared images, it just helps a little bit. It's not crucial, but it's just one other little step that makes life a bit easier. When we come to think about lenses for infrared photography, generally speaking, whatever lens you want to use, you can go ahead and use. But in practice, there are some lenses that don't react too well to an infrared converted camera. Here's one of the early pictures from our converted Canon camera, and I shot this with a 16 to 35mm Canon lens. I was fortunate that I actually had a spare lens. But look carefully right in the center of the frame. Can you see that hot spot? It's very hard to actually get rid of. If you look closely, it even takes up sort of the shape of the diaphragm, and in some instances it can be a lot worse than this. A quick search online for infrared compatible lenses will soon find you a list of lenses which are reputedly good for converted cameras and those which are not, and unfortunately the 16 to 35mm Canon, while brilliant for normal light photography, is not so good here, which forced me to move on to a different lens. So I moved on to the 17 to 40 Canon lens because I wanted that sort of range. Here you can see an image from the Canon 5D converted camera through the 17 to 40mm lens. Once again, you can see a 90th of a second at f8 at 200 ISO. But I've now shot hundreds of images with this lens and there is no sign of that hotspot at all. So to bring this presentation to a close, let me show you just one or two images that we've shot in the last 3 to 4 months. In this first image, it may not immediately be obvious that this is in fact an infrared image. The sky does give it away a little, but this has been one of the surprises to me with infrared photography, the fact that with some subjects they could be just normal black and white shots, but with great contrast. The low angle here does help the impact of the image, as does the figure at the end of the jetty, and I chose to stop down the lens to f11 to capture a greater depth of field. Another aspect of infrared photography that has surprised me is that images that don't have much appeal in colour seem to work so well in infrared. At the time I had the opportunity to take this shot in colour, but I chose not to. However, I suppose I have to be a little careful that I don't allow my enthusiasm for infrared to cloud my judgment. As you can see, I have been experimenting by adding delicate colour to my completed images. Here you can see the light was low and to my left, throwing those shadows back from the trunk of the tree. Can you see the pattern in the exposure though? It doesn't vary that much between shots. This shot is a bit different in that it's a sunset picture and not a traditional time of day for infrared photography. Nevertheless, it does seem to capture the tones pretty well. Unless I am allowing my enthusiasm to cloud my judgment, it produces a fairly good image. Here a little more exposure was required, but then you would expect that in the lower light conditions. This image demonstrates one of the other pluses of shooting infrared images. The fact that right in the middle of the day, in the brightest Australian sunshine, I can capture images that we would normally associate with the golden hour. Infrared certainly does extend the photographic day. Here is another image shot in the brightest of conditions where the high contrast has been handled remarkably well by the infrared converted camera. I do have a colour version of this, but I feel this image has far more impact and power. Here I have an autumn scene taken in Scotland. And once again, you may not consider this to be a traditional infrared image, but it does have the characteristics in the sky and in what foliage we can see. Infrared light does vary throughout the year, so I would expect it to be lower in autumn Scotland, but still it's an effective medium to record this old crofter's cottage. Since it was erected in February 1998, the Angel of the North has become one of the most talked about pieces of public art ever produced. It stands around 20 metres in height and sits beside the A1 in Gateshead, which is in the northeast of England. The Angel dominates the skyline, and it's not to be missed. It's made from 200 tons of steel, and it has a wingspan of 54 metres. The conditions we found were bright and contrasty, but we were able to capture both colour and infrared images. However, the shape of the Angel here does lend itself nicely to a black and white image. In this shot we're back in Australia at Nambucca Heads, looking up at the headland from the beach at the lookout way above us, and allowing the infrared to give us that dramatic sky. As you would expect shooting into the light, our exposure reflects a slightly higher shutter speed. The next two images are simple shots, which I think demonstrates the power and appeal of infrared photography. Taken in the middle of the day, in the brightest sunshine you're likely to find anywhere. Both this image and the next were taken straight into the light, although I did take the precaution of hiding the worst of the sun behind a branch or two. Simple images that do demonstrate infrared characteristics, but I think they demonstrate appeal too. I had been thinking about an infrared conversion for some years now, but to avoid having to buy the camera as well as pay for the infrared conversion, I waited until one became surplus. In the past, our surplus cameras, when we needed to upgrade them, were normally passed on to our family because the trade-in value just wasn't really worth having. However, now I have taken the plunge into an infrared converted camera, I wish I'd been able to do so earlier. It really is great fun.